Actor Lee Marvin reveals his 7 worst detractors. Lee Marvin came into this world in the Big Apple on February 19, 1924. There is a long history of military service in Marvin's family. Both he and his brothers served in the military. His father had been a veteran of World War I. This preliminary his career would be defined by a nonsense, tough masculinity that was shaped by his exposure to discipline and duty. He was a troublemaker and a rebellious student who had problems fitting in at schools in both Florida and New Jersey. His youth foreshadowed his eventual defiant nature and intense intensity, carried over into his acting roles in film. During joining the United States Marine Corps at the tender age of 18, Marvin's life underwent a sea change during the onset of World War II. In 1944, he was seriously injured by a machine gun fire while serving with the 4th Marine Division in the Pacific Theater. He witnessed harsh warfare during the Battle of Saipan. After enduring 2 gunshot wounds to the buttocks and sciatic nerve, he spent more than a year recuperating in a naval hospital. Eventually, he was bestowed the Purple Heart. His physical and mental wounds from the war served him well in his portrayal of hardened criminals, warriors, and outlaws. Actor Marvin had first-hand experience with the horrors of war, setting him apart from the numerous performers who merely performed heroic roles in the war. This authenticity was immediately apparent to viewers. Marvin worked his way through a series of odd jobs after the war until he landed a job as a plumber's helper at a local theater. His interest in acting began when, seemingly out of the blue, he was invited to fill in for an unwell actor in a small role. After receiving encouragement from his instructors, he decided to attend the American Theater Wing in New York for his training. Quickly moving on from theater work, his unusual height, rough appearance, and natural energy set him apart. Onto the silver screen, Marvin began his Hollywood career playing supporting roles in westerns and war films, frequently as heavy hitters, villains, and soldiers. Strong supporting parts in films like 1953's The Big Heat, in which he played a terrifying gangster, and On Bad Day at Black Rock, 1955. His intimidating presence intensified the tension. He became one of Hollywood's most dependable villains of the decade, lending an air of menace and grit to every part he played. But the 1960s were the decade that catapulted him from supporting actor to Hollywood superstar. Films starring Marvin demonstrated his adaptability. He played the role of the savage outlaw Liberty Valance with John Wayne and James Stewart in John Ford's 1962 film, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, making him one of the most iconic antagonists in Western cinema. In Cat Bellaloo 1965, he stunned viewers with a lighter side as he played both functions. 2 villains, Tim Strawn and the inebriated gunfighter Kid Lean. He became an indelible member of Hollywood's elite with his humorous yet moving performance, which garnered him the Oscar for Best Actor. This victory propelled Marvin to the status of one of the era's most charismatic lead actors. One of his most famous films, the 1967 ensemble military epic The Dirty Dozen, in which he appeared, was a huge financial success. He captivated audiences with his authoritative portrayal of Major John Reisman, a prisoner sent on a perilous mission. Fans and shaped the genre of action and war movies that came after it. In 1967's Point Blank, a chic neon-noir thriller, he played an unrelenting anti-hero. And in 1969's Paint Your Wagon, a musical, he shocked viewers with his singing, albeit in his growly, off-key style. Despite his fame, Marvin was notoriously unruly and a free spirit in Hollywood. He favored a low-key existence of fishing, boating, and living in the great outdoors above the glitz and glamour of fame. He frequently sought refuge in his beloved Baja California, Mexico, or his house in Tucson, Arizona, where he discovered serenity outside of the business world. A person's personal and professional life can be impacted by alcoholism, which Marvin openly discussed. He kept appearing in films during his later years, including 1973's Emperor of the North, 1974's The Klansman, 1979's Avalanche Express, and many more. 1983 in Gorky Park. The changing Hollywood scene made Marvin's brand of masculinity appear all the more rare, but he never lost the gravitas and severity he brought to his parts. Along with Chuck Norris, he played a weathered military commander in his last picture, 1986's The Delta Force. His role as an action hero deserves praise. Lee Marvin's complicated and multifaceted private life mirrored his illustrious professional life. During his early career in Hollywood, Marvin married Betty Ebling in April 1952. Their marriage lasted for 15 years and resulted in the birth of 4 children. The couple's firstborn, a son, called from 1952 till his death in 2013. Christopher Lamont Marvin was a virtuous heir to the Marvin family name. The Marvin girls Courtney Lee, Cynthia Louise, and Claudia Leslie were born to him and his wife from 1958 to 2012. In Marvin's often chaotic life, each child brought happiness and duty, balancing his fatherly responsibilities with his acting career. In contrast to his tough on-screen personas, Marvin's children reflected a gentler, more private side of him, which his friends, co-workers, and fans frequently noted. In spite of the fact that within the family, there were challenges in Lee and Betty's marriage, a combination of Marvin's unpredictable behavior, excessive drinking, and the stresses of Hollywood life created an unmanageable tension. Their marriage formally ended in divorce in January 1967, following a 2-year separation. Marvin and Betty's children, who were raised in the spotlight of Hollywood and the shadow of family strife, felt the anguish of their parents' divorce just as much as everyone else. The first Mrs. Betty offered her open memoir, Tales of a Hollywood Housewife, written many years later in 2010, in which she discussed their marriage from her own perspective. Marvin Lee, she wrote about her life as the wife of an aspiring movie star in the book, discussing the highs and lows of being married to someone whose work required her undivided attention. Marvin was accused of having an affair with someone else by Betty, who went so far as to say that he was unfaithful during their marriage. Renowned actress Anne Bancroft, a development that further complicated the story of Marvin's private life. His sexual life after his divorce remained in the spotlight, thanks in large part to his prominent and long-term romance with Michelle Triola, who played a pivotal role in both his life story and the public's perception of him. Alongside the development of American law, their partnership came to an end in a palimony litigation that was well publicized and tested the limits of cohabitation rights in the 1970s. Nevertheless, Marvin discovered some stability and comfort following that relationship's turmoil when he reconnected with Pamela Feely, his love from childhood. The reconnection went beyond a simple romantic reconciliation. Going back to his simpler life before his popularity had gotten in the way brought him a sense of familiarity, comfort, and innocence. Their 1970 wedding was different from Marvin's earlier unions, lived through from the early 1980s, when his health began to decline, through his death in 1987. Pamela was by his side through all of the ups and downs of his career. Pamela published the romance memoir Lee in 1997, after Marvin had passed away, as a way to honor their love and his memories. In the book, she revealed not just private details about their relationship, but also an honest depiction of the man whose rough front he wore. Despite Marvin's reputation as the gravel-voiced anti-hero from films like Point Blank and The Dirty Dozen, Pamela portrayed a kinder, more caring, and really human side of the character. In writing her book, she accomplished 2 goals. First, to honor Lee Marvin's film legacy, and second, to pay tribute to the more personal realms of love, camaraderie, and family that had brought them together again after a long separation. The towering, gravelly-voiced, notoriously gruff performer Lee Marvin did not be subtle about how he felt about the other performances. Marvin shocked Hollywood once by declaring that he could not stand certain actors, an admission that was consistent with his reputation for being brutally honest and frequently canonical. Marvin was unafraid to be named when prompted. For whatever reason, 7 men in the industry irritated him, and he named them all. Names betrayed as much about Marvin's character as they did the people he hated, with their histories of animosity, problems in the workplace, and personality quarrels. The late John Wayne, because of their shared background in war films and westerns. Marvin's admirers wrongly believed that he idolized Wayne. In reality, though Marvin hated Wayne, both during their Academy Award battle and while filming The Comancheros, the two got into an altercation. One of them was Marvin, who was resentful of Wayne's meticulously crafted reputation as a war hero, despite the reality that Wayne had never served in the military. Despite having been wounded in action during World War II, he supposedly remarked that Wayne was the best soldier ever, but that he couldn't handle the dirt, blood, and gunfire. Like Wayne, Marvin despised views on politics, thinking he was overly conservative, and the rift between them persisted right up until Marvin passed away. Richard Gere, Marvin frequently said that Charles Bronson was arrogant and unfeeling. Gritty action pieces were their usual fare. However, Marvin believed Bronson was overly dependent on his physical charisma and underdeveloped as an actor. On set, he said Bronson was hostile and unhelpful, not wanting to talk to anyone. Marvin was the more outgoing and combative one, while Bronson was more introverted and gloomy. One time, Marvin said, "Working with Bronson is like talking to a wall, except the wall has more personality." Robert, Marvin and Mitchum were famously feuding despite their shared reputation for tough guy charm. Marvin said that Mitchum was unmotivated. He loathed Mitchum for what he perceived as coasting through jobs and frequently showed up to sets unprepared or drunk. Similarly, Mitchum made fun of Marvin for being too dramatic and dominating on screen. At a Hollywood party, their animosity reached a boiling point when Marvin accused Mitchum of daydreaming through entire movie, leading to which Mitchum shot back with, "At least I don't scream my lines like I'm still in boot camp." Telly Savalas was the type of performer who Marvin had little patience for, since he believed he cared more about his public persona than his acting skills. Marvin has no love for Savalas's perpetually touting himself, his obsession with his distinctive bald appearance, and his renown for causing friction with filmmakers. Marvin allegedly accused Savalas of attempting scene steals and called him a peacock in combat boots during filming The Dirty Dozen. They were so competitive with one another that crew members frequently had to restrain them between each take. Marvin was also irritated by Yul Brynner, another actor. Marvin's rough-and-tumble attitude contrasted with Bryner's aristocratic, almost distant manner. Marvin despised Brynner because he was always trying to steal the show from both on and separate from the screen. He was critical of Bryner's control, freak habits, and his insistence on having the camera pan in a certain way so that he looked his best. "Brinter doesn't act," Marvin once joked. "I thought he was just standing there waiting for the light to hit him." Is that so? Because of Bryner's involvement, Marvin declined a project and said, "I'd rather drink battery acid than share a scene with him." The tension between them eventually reached a boiling point. Tony. Because of Tony Curtis's apparent fakery, Marvin hated him. According to Marvin, Curtis personified all that was artificial in Hollywood. Flawless appearance, charisma, and stardom devoid of determination. Curtis and Marvin had different ideas about what it meant to be an actor, and Curtis was more than happy to play romantic leads, because Curtis could keep up his pretty boy persona. Marvin was particularly resentful of him, while Marvin had to graft his way into tough guy roles, scarred from his combat experiences. Tony Curtis wouldn't last 2 minutes in a bar fight, Marvin once scornfully remarked. However, he is accorded the status of a legendary figure. Sinatra, Frank, possibly the most unexpected surname on Marvin, had Frank Sinatra on his list. Marvin thought Sinatra was haughty, short-tempered, and rude to the crew and actors. Despite how much everyone admired him as an actor and singer, Marvin, who had little patience for what he saw as incompetence, criticized Sinatra for his habit of arrive late, depart early, and assume that everyone will bend to his will. On set of Dirty Dozen, they fight. Marvin was left with nothing but scorn when Sinatra withdrew from the relationship. He went on to say that Sinatra was the type of person who felt the entire world owed him praise because entering a space. The fact that Lee Marvin named 7 performers he despised speaks as much about his obstinate character as it does about the ones he detested. As a wounded and proud veteran of the Marines, Marvin had little sympathy for what he perceived as Hollywood's egotism, sloth, and pretentiousness, regardless of the validity of his comments or the influence of his own abrasive personality. Marvin never shied away from expressing his thoughts. Even in his latter years, he maintained his reputation as an actor who would prefer to sever ties than put on a show of affection for someone he hated. Marvin experienced health issues due to his heavy drinking and smoking. The last days of his life, Marvin spent over 2 weeks in the hospital in December 1986 due to a coccidio illness. He experienced difficulty breathing and was given steroids to alleviate his symptoms. Significant intestine ruptures, and had to have a colectomy done. On August 29, 1987, at the age of 63, Marvin passed away due to a heart attack. The Arlington National Cemetery witnessed his burial with full military honors.